Right now you're listening to me on the Rode Broadcaster running through the Rodecaster Pro, but this is not the Rode Procaster because those are all different products. Not confusing at all. But the Broadcaster has a broad history that I would like to explore because I really think that this is one of Rode's, if not their most underrated microphone. I think it's kind of an overlooked and often forgotten microphone because it sort of exists from a different era of Rode's history. And I do want to thank my good friend Bronson over at the Audio Hotline YouTube channel for sending me this microphone because I had never used it, but I was super curious about it. He had one and wasn't using it, and then now I have it, and that's awesome because he is such a nice, wonderful, spectacular human being. So thanks, Bronson and Audio Hotline. The Broadcaster was originally released in 1998, so it has a pretty long history, and in my mind, Rode kind of has several distinct eras. They've been around for a long time, but recently, at least we'll say since like 2019, since the release of the original Rodecaster Pro and the PodMic and that kind of era, I feel like that has led to a new version of Rode because once the Rodecaster came out, their products were really adopted by the streaming, podcasting, solo and small team production world kind of stuff. And then you have things like the Rodecaster Pro 2, the Duo, the Streamer X, the Rodecaster Video. They're kind of really embracing that sort of new direction of technology and production. And I think that's all really cool. Like, I think it's awesome. I love it. Huge fan, as you probably know. But this microphone is from 1998 when you could have paired it with your Canon XL1 to produce some really sweet early late 90s content. But a really cool thing about XLR microphones is that they're relatively timeless. You do not need the latest and greatest all the time. You do not need crazy leaps in technology. There really aren't that many. They're just good microphones out there. So sometimes an older microphone or a microphone that's been in production a long time. This one isn't from 1998. It's, I'm guessing, significantly newer. I don't know when Bronson bought this. But with an MSRP of $419, this is definitely not a super cheap microphone. It was intended to be used professionally in radio stations and broadcast situations, especially in a world, before podcasting, before YouTube, before online content and all that stuff. Like, you're working with dial-up internet, pros are using microphones like these. And it's got some really cool features because of that. First, the build quality, as you would expect from a Rode mic, is excellent. It's built like a tank. You could use it as a weapon if you really need to. Unfortunately, since it is a little bit older, it's not 100% compatible with, newer, more convenient things. So for example, it comes with this little clip here to sort of like attach the microphone in. This is kind of an old school way because if I undo this ring down here, the ring is separate, the microphone is separate, and that's not the end of the world, but on newer microphones and newer shock mounts and stuff, Rode kind of has a built-in ring, so that way you don't have to like keep track of all these little parts. The microphone just slips in, the ring never leaves, and then you can just tighten the microphone. This has a different size like XLR mount, so it doesn't fit in the newer shock mounts, and it kind of sort of can almost fit in a couple of Rode's modern shock mounts, but because it has this like protuberance right here, it's a little janky. I'm sure there are people out there who could make it fit in a newer shock mount, but it's not something I would really recommend since I can't guarantee that it's going to work well for you. But it is a large diaphragm end address condenser microphone. So a lot of times condenser mics, you sort of speak into the side of them. This one I'm speaking into the end. That's not like super unique, but it is sort of unique-ish. But again, you think of radio stations, multiple boom arms swinging around, and microphones, it just kind of is easier for microphones to be end address in those situations, not unlike the SM7B. Condenser mics in general, I love their sound. I have no effects, no processing running right now, but if I turn on the Broadcaster preset in the Rodecaster Pro 2, this is what it sounds like with a bit of EQ and a bit of processing. I love the way that it sounds. I think it's a great mic. I've been using it a lot. I've had it for a number of months now and just haven't made a review on it yet, but that's fine because I get to use it a lot more. And I always use it with basically this Broadcaster preset. I think it sounds awesome this way. I'm going to leave it on for a little bit just so you can hear it and kind of let your ears get used to an EQ'd sound, and then we'll go back to the unprocessed sound. And because of its intended use in those professional settings, it does have a couple of features that are pretty neat. There is a high-pass filter right here, a 75 hertz high-pass filter, which I have turned off. So actually, let me turn off the processing. Now I have no processing, no EQ happening, and the high-pass filter is off. And if I flip this little switch, which is very satisfying to switch, now the high pass filter is on. So what that means, a high pass filter, it blocks out low end frequencies, basically below 75 hertz, and then lets the higher frequencies pass over the filter. So right now you might have noticed there was a little bit of breathiness, a little bit more propensity for plosives as I was kind of close to the microphone with the high pass filter, and those kind of went away. If I take off the high pass filter, now you can kind of hear the low end come back. So that's always a nice thing to use if you're in a situation where you're working with some of the super low voice. Maybe there's some like rumbling in the environment, there's air conditioners, those kinds of things. In general though, what I would recommend when microphones have things like this is to play with them, experiment, see if you flip the switch. If you really love the way the mic sounds, awesome. In general, for me, I never use these on the microphone because I prefer to be able to make those adjustments in editing later if I need to. Right now, if I flip this high pass filter switch, which flipping it down towards the microphone, there's like, it's not super clear when it's on or off. So flipping the switch towards the microphone turns on the high pass filter. Flipping the switch away from the microphone turns off the high pass filter. But if I were to record this whole video with the high pass filter turned on, and then I took it into editing and realized that the sound was a little bit thin, I would then have to like artificially boost the low end, and it's not going to sound as natural as it would have if I just left the filter off like this and let the natural low end show up. And then when I'm editing, if I want to add a high pass filter, I can kind of dial in a more specific one to suit my voice and my environment a little bit better. And another really cool feature that I'm not sure how many of us can actually use with the gear that we're using now, but it's cool and I wish I could use it, is the little LED right here is actually kind of like a tally lamp, a sort of an active mic indicator. There's no mute or anything on the microphone like that, but if you're using a regular XLR cable, a 3-pin on one side, but a 5-pin on the other, you can run this into higher end mixers, higher end production boards, and they actually have the ability to turn this light on or off based on which microphone is active, which microphone is muted. So in theory, if you were in a radio station type environment and you had a bunch of broadcaster microphones around the table, you could have the LED light up on which microphones were active whenever they're active. For most of us though, as soon as you have phantom power turned on and the microphone is active, the LED will turn on. And as a condenser microphone, it does require phantom power in order to operate, which is another reason I really like condensers, because it makes them very easy to recommend, since any mixer, any interface has 48-volt phantom power. So I never have to worry about something like when someone wants an SM7B or a dynamic microphone that's a little quieter, and then I have to start talking to them about, what mixer, what interface you're using. You might need a booster. Here's how boosters work. And I've seen people get a little bit overwhelmed and discouraged when they think all they need is a microphone, then it turns out they kind of need all this other stuff too. With condenser microphones, you just need some sort of XLR mixer, some sort of XLR interface, and you're good to go because they don't need that much gain. I'm using 27 decibels out of the Rodecaster's available 76 decibels to run this microphone right now. I do want to do a few plosive and handling tests. So this is me sort of picking up the microphone, handling it. It is not very susceptible to handling noise. Obviously, it's not intended to be a handheld microphone, but it is solid and sturdy, and it honestly doesn't. It's not a terrible handheld microphone if you don't have a stand or an arm or anything. It's heavy. You might get tired of holding it for a long time. But in general, it's pretty good at rejecting handling noise. And since it's not supposed to be handheld, if it's on a mic stand or on a boom arm and you're moving it around while you're recording, very much like the SM7B, it's not going to cause a bunch of distractions. Some microphones are very susceptible to handling noise, so if you touch them, move them, adjust them while you're recording, it becomes very, very distracting. And then there is also a pop filter built inside of this, so Peter Piper pitched a podcast. It, to me, is not absolutely amazing at rejecting plosives. If you get close and you speak directly into the microphone, you could still have plosive problems. But if you position the microphone again at that 45-degree angle, like pretty much every microphone should typically be used, then you don't have as many plosive problems because your breath is going past the microphone, not directly into it. So just know it does have a built-in pop filter. It does allow for plosive rejection, but it's not the best at rejecting plosives like some other microphones are. And I have found that you are able to use windscreens for the Rode PodMic on the broadcast, and they fit pretty well. This is a dock pop. I can pop that right on there. And now Peter Piper pitched a podcast. Even if I try really hard to have plosive problems with plosivity, there's not really any problem there. It's blocking everything with the windscreen combined with the microphone's built-in pop filter. So that covers a little bit of the history and the features of the Rode Broadcaster, and I would like to do some comparisons. I have some mics over here. Not every microphone under the sun, but there are a few that I chose specifically for either feature similarities or price similarities or both, and then we can hear how those sound compared to the Broadcaster. So that means right now you're listening to me on the Rode Broadcaster, and now you're listening to me on the Rode NT1 Signature Series. I wanted to do this comparison first because I feel like in terms of more modern Rode microphones, This is a more direct competitor, although not 100%. The NT1 microphone has been around for a long time. This is like the 5.5th generation of it, basically. But this specific version, this signature series, is really only maybe a little over a year old at this point. Time flies, so it might be a little older than that. It has an MSRP of $169. It comes with a shock mount, with a pop filter, and with an XLR cable, which is pretty good for that price. And it's available in some super cool colors. So cool I can't even talk, like this blue right here, which blew my mind when I saw it for the first time. It's gorgeous. It's not quite as heavy duty as the Broadcaster is, and as I'm handling the microphone, again, it's not designed to be a handheld microphone, but it does pick up more handling noise than the Broadcaster does. It is also way more prone to plosives, so mic positioning with the NT1 is even more crucial. It does come with a pop filter that mounts in the shock mount, and that will take care of all your plosive problems, but as I've talked about in other videos, sometimes in this, especially if you are doing video related things, it can be a bit big and distracting in frame. So, it's not something that might always be practical to use, even though it does work really well. And this has had no effects and no processing, same as the Broadcaster over here with no effects and no processing. But now I'm going to turn on effects with the Broadcaster. So this is the Broadcaster with processing and effects. And this is the NT1 with processing and effects. My brain is struggling today. They sound a lot more similar now. So going back from the NT1 over here to the Broadcaster, now they sound quite similar once you've added some effects, some EQ. And that's kind of the case for any microphone. You can really bring different microphones together in much more compatible ways once you add a little bit of EQ and processing. But sometimes it is nice to just know what things sound like without any effects or processing. Now this is the Broadcaster with no effects, no processing. And this is the NT1 with no effects and no processing. So now back over here on the Rode Broadcaster, we're going to move over here to the Rode Procaster running through the Rodecaster Pro. Again, separate products, totally different things. Procaster, Rodecaster Pro, not the same thing. Broadcaster, oh boy, my guitars are Telecasters and Stratocasters. And I'm a podcaster. Okay, the Rode Procaster is a dynamic microphone with an MSRP of $229, so more than the NT1 Signature Series, but less than the Broadcaster. I am using 50 decibels a gain to get this level right here, which honestly, I almost feel like I should bump that up just a little bit to 52. And I do have a little pop filter on here from BSW. It's like Broadcast Supply Warehouse. This is actually made for the RE20, but it fits this microphone as well. Peter Piper pitched a podcast. Peter Piper pitched a podcast. You can kind of hear it's prone to plosives. Peter Piper pitched a podcast. I can speak directly into the microphone with this little pop filter on here, and it does not have any plosives at all. And I also really like the way that it looks. It's just sort of a cool little like old school looking thing. So again, handling noise, this is a little more susceptible to handling noise than the Broadcaster is, but again, not intended to be a handheld microphone. Just something to be aware of when you have the microphone in a, in a boom arm, in a stand, and you're moving it while recording. The thing about the Procaster, it's heavy. And if you put this in a shock mount, it's a very heavy setup. So you need to make sure that you're using a strong boom arm that's able to support the weight of it. The Broadcaster itself is also not a lightweight microphone, but it's not as heavy as this, especially when this is in a shock mount and stuff, which is helpful because of that handling noise. So again, I've been using no effects and no processing. And now I'm going to turn on some processing on the Broadcaster, and then this is the Procaster with processing. So even though we're talking about dynamic and condenser microphones, you can hear their sound is a lot more similar now once I've added some EQ and processing. But if we go back to their natural sounds, this is the Broadcaster with no effects, and this is the Procaster with no effects. And now back on the Broadcaster, the next microphone, kind of keeping in line with the Rode things, we're going to go down the road of more dynamic microphones to the Rode PodMic. This is the PodMic USB with no effects and no processing. This has an MSRP of $199. It has, because it has XLR and USB functionality, some pretty cool USB functionality. It's a really good microphone. The sound quality though, pretty much exactly the same as the original, the regular PodMic, which has an MSRP of $99. So we're going from the $100 to $200 price range depending on which model you get. And you can kind of hear, this is built really well. Still handling noise with the PodMic if you're moving it around a lot, but it does have this yoke here. So in theory, if you're holding it with a boom arm and you move it like this, it's not It's not going to give you crazy handling noise. The Shure SM7B is the best microphone I've ever used when it comes to rejecting handling noise. So that's kind of my gold standard. So far, none of the microphones we've used yet have met that level, but the Broadcaster comes kind of close. So jumping back over here to the Broadcaster with no effects and no processing. Now I'm going to turn on some effects and processing with the Broadcaster. There we go. Now you're listening to me with effects and processing turned on. And now you're listening to me with effects and processing turned on the PodMic. Something about the PodMic, if I turn off these effects right here, it does have a thinner sound, kind of a harsher sound. It doesn't necessarily sound great on every voice, but you can EQ it. I even have a whole video about making the PodMic sound better. And now I turn on some of that processing and sort of like boost the low end, tame some of those high ends, and now it can be a really solid sounding microphone. So now I've turned off the effects and processing again. The PodMic does have a really nice built-in pop filter, so it works quite well without anything. Peter Piper pitched a podcast. That's really not bad at all, but it does also come, or not come with, but you can get windscreens. Actually, the USB does come with a black version of these, the WS14, but you can also get colored versions. And then once you have one of these turned on, Peter Piper pitched a podcast. You never have to worry about plosives again, and I really love just the color that this adds. It's pretty cool. It doesn't really fit on the Broadcaster. It's very loose, so it'll work. I could slide that on there. Peter Piper pitched a podcast, but it's a little bit janky. I think this microphone deserves better than that. Up next, we're going to move down the road away from Rode microphones and use a few other microphones. So this is the Rode Broadcaster with no effects and no processing. And now this is the Lewitt LCT 440 Pure with no effects and no processing. This has an MSRP of $299, so just over $100 cheaper than the Broadcaster. I absolutely love my Lewitt microphones because they are awesome. And the LCT 240 is a great one that has a $99 MSRP, and I would say it's like 90% the sound quality of the 440, the difference being the capsule size. This has a much larger capsule, which captures, I don't know, better quality sound. So I really, really do love the sound of the 440. There's, again, no effects and no processing. If I turn on a little bit of effects and processing, we add, some compression, some EQ, all that kind of stuff. You can get, that more broadcasty sound. And then if I have the effects and processing turned on in the Broadcaster, these two sound pretty similar. Broadcaster, LCT 440, LCT 440. So you can, again, mix and match different brands, mix and match different types of microphones. And now let's go back in here and turn off effects and processing. This is the Lewitt with no effects and no processing. And this is the Broadcaster with no effects and no processing. The Lewitt, a couple things to be aware with these microphones. They do, depending on which kit you get, and the 440 does come with more accessories. It comes with a pop filter, a shock mount, and a windscreen. It is not crazy susceptible to handling noise. If I hold the XLR cable so I'm not getting that cable sound, the microphone itself, very little handling noise, I don't know. Overall, I think it has very little handling noise, but Peter Piper pitched a podcast more susceptible to plosives, so working on your positioning and then using, let's show you. The Lewitt mics have these magnetic pop filters that come with them, and they basically go down over and they attach to the shock mount when the mic is in the shock mount. And then Peter Piper pitched a podcast. I love these because they have a very low profile and they just look kind of cool, and magnets are very satisfying. So I pretty much always use my Lewitt mics with the metal mesh pop filter. I had to buy an extra one for the 240 because it didn't come with it, but the 440 did come with it. And so does the Lewitt Ray, which is the 440 that has sort of more advanced, like it can tell how far away you are from the microphone and adjust the gain accordingly, or automatically mute the microphone based on how far or close you are from it. And now as we move on to a more direct competitor with the Rode Broadcaster, you might be wondering what on earth works similarly, and that would be the Earthworks ETHOS. That was clever. This is a $399 MSRP, so basically the same, $20 less than the Broadcaster over here. The ETHOS is one of my favorite microphones of all time. It has a great sound, as you can hear. It's kind of similar to the Broadcaster. It's an end address condenser microphone, so it is a condenser microphone. It has very little issues with handling noise, which is very, very nice. And the capsule itself, Peter Piper pitched a podcast, can be very prone to plosives, but it comes with a great windscreen. Peter Piper pitched a podcast, so you pretty much never have to worry about plosives there. And this one, the way I've described it in the past as being the least fatiguing microphone that I've used, or one of the least fatiguing, meaning right now I have no effects, no processing, but even if I do add in a bit of flare, let me see. there we go, some effects and processing. This microphone is something that if you listen to it for long periods of time, long podcasts, long live streams, audiobooks, whatever, it doesn't tire out the listener's ears. There's just something about it that has a very comforting, nice, kind of natural quality to it. And I think the Broadcaster, this is with effects and EQ and processing, which, I can turn those off. How you choose to EQ your microphone is great. But you can kind of hear there's a little more brightness here, which I think sounds awesome. But again, now I do have effects and processing turned on. But going over here, this to me just has like a very smooth sound. It's hard to do mic tests because your ears adjust to different microphones. So it's like you become your own worst enemy at a certain point. The smoothness and just the overall niceness of listening to the Ethos is something that I really enjoy. So here I'm going to turn off effects and processing on the Ethos, and I'm going to turn off effects and processing on the Broadcaster so you can kind of hear how they sound together. Both excellent microphones, very similar in price. The Ethos has no switches, nothing like that, but it does come with this Triad Orbit mount on here, which is incredibly strong. And it's just a nice, strong ball head, so it's super easy to position and mount on pretty much anything. It's a very heavy-duty, very well-made microphone. I love the Earthworks stuff and the Ethos. I guess I should be on the Ethos as I'm saying this. The Ethos has always been one of my favorites. And now last in this comparison, but certainly not least, is the Shure SM7B. I cannot do a microphone, it can't do a mic comparison without having the SM7B in here. It's just one of the most popular microphones in the world. You always want to know how the SM7B sounds compared to other microphones and how it compares. And because the Broadcaster and the SM7B have very similar prices, this is an MSRP of $399, same as the Ethos, which by the way, just fun fact, the Ethos's original price when it was released several years ago was $750, maybe $800, and they knocked it down to $399, which is a huge price discount, but clearly to make it a direct competitor to the SM7B. This is the SM7B with no effects and no processing, and this is the Rode Broadcaster with no effects and no processing. And now we can sort of flip that a little bit. I'm going to turn on some effects and processing with the Broadcaster, and now this is my SM7B preset. So even these two very different microphones, dynamic condenser, really low, quiet output versus high output, they sound significantly more similar. The SM7B with no effects and no processing does have that very flat sound. It's a microphone, like many, but especially this one, that are made to be EQ'd to suit the specific voice, environment, tone, style, and preferences of whatever you're doing. Or it could be stone tile. I don't know. Maybe make a podcast about tiles and things. And then when you do add some effects and processing, this is my SM7B preset that I put together. It really can make the microphone shine on any voice. But we'll do the rest of this comparison without any effects or processing so you can hear the difference between them. Now the thing is, here we go. Peter Piper pitched a podcast, the SM7B, very impervious to plosives. Even if I take the windscreen off, which this is a Reporter Store one, but there are also dock pops for this as well. It has the metal mesh pop filter here. You can see it over here. Metal mesh pop filter. Peter Piper pitched a podcast. I can just use it like this with no problem. And then once you put a windscreen on it, Peter Piper pitched a podcast. It's even better. And the SM7B also does come with a crazy poofy windscreen. So if you want to make sure that someone could just be breathing all kinds of breath, you just want to interview a leaf blower on your podcast, you can use this, and then you will never have a hint of plosive problems whatsoever, because it's the biggest windscreen in the world. But as I've hinted, especially with my videos where I do a wireless version of the SM7B, the lack of handling noise, there is the little thing here to tighten the SM7B to a mic stand. If I hold that so it's not jiggling around, the microphone itself, virtually no handling noise. I'm knocking on the microphone, you can barely hear it. This is a microphone you can use as a handheld mic, and it works great, even though it's a little bit ridiculous. But when it's on a mic stand, it's on a boom arm, and you need to adjust it while recording, no problem at all. You can just move it wherever it needs to be, and it's not going to be distracting or disruptive. If I go back over here to the Broadcaster and I do my door knocking test, that's actually pretty good. But you can even hear how much more dead sounding the SM7B is. So I would actually say that the Broadcaster is the second best microphone I have at rejecting handling noise, because it works really, really well, but it's still not quite at the same level as the SM7B, which is just pretty unreal. So with all that in mind, I hope you have a better understanding of the Rode Broadcaster. I hope maybe, this microphone that's been around since 1998, maybe it's a little bit overlooked, maybe it's a little bit forgotten, but maybe it's the perfect microphone for you. And after hearing how it compares and some of the features that it has and just sort of the way that it works, maybe it's something that you might be interested in getting for your own setup. And speaking of setups, that was a setup for a nice transition to thank everyone for helping support the channel through YouTube channel memberships. And if you want to learn a little bit more about different mic comparison and reviews, check out some of these videos right here.